Downsview branch. Now, welcome you all. June is a really exciting time for us. We have Aboriginal Heritage Month, Seniors Month, and of course, Italian Heritage Month. And I'm proud to say that this year we are having 5 Italian-inspired programs. One of them being today's program on Italian influences in the modern world. Our presenter today has played a key role in putting together Bill 103, or setting it up to establish Italian Heritage Month. So please welcome today Michael Tibollo, President of the National Congress of Italian Canadians.
Good morning, or good afternoon, I guess. It's 1 o'clock. My background, just for the people that don't know me, there's a few people that are English, so I'm going to make my comments in English if that's okay. If you want some comments in Italian, I'm more than happy to do that as well. But my background is Canadian. I was born in Canada. My parents immigrated here, and my first language was Italian at home. The influences that I had in my life were always based on understanding or living the culture and the tradition of the Italians. And it was interesting because as a boy growing up, being a Canadian living in Toronto, wanting to feel a part of my community, it was almost like having to hide the Italian identity or the Italian background that you had because you wanted to be accepted. And that tradition continued, or the way of living continued until I got to high school. And when I got to high school, it was another interesting community because the high school I went to was a high school of an Irish school, St. Michael's College. But the interesting part there was a small group of Italians and there was a small group of Polish and Ukrainian kids. So the Polish, Ukrainian, and the Italian kids kind of formed their own little society, their own little group. We had an Italian club, and I was involved in the Italian club from day one. My parents always wanted us to be Italian, but the problem always was that there wasn't anyone to really inspire us or make us feel Italian, because in those days it just wasn't, again, something that we were able to be really vocal about or proud about. And it's interesting and I'm not talking a long time ago, I'm talking since the 70s, so most of you understand this, either having immigrated to Canada or living in Canada, having been born in Canada and going through the same things that I would have gone through back then. In the, I guess it was the late 1970s, it was 79, 1980, I was asked by Centro Scuola Cultura Italiana to teach Italian. And by that point I had studied Italian and I had a good knowledge of it, so I spent time teaching children Italian. When they used to come into the classroom, no one wanted to be there. The classes would start at 4 o'clock in the afternoon or 3:30 just after class. And it was the heritage language program back then. The kids would come in and the last thing they wanted to do was be listening to me talk. They'd rather be outside playing soccer or playing with their friends hockey or watching Superman, anything but study, because again, Italian wasn't something that they felt was important or relevant anymore. So what ended up happening was I came up with this idea that these kids needed to understand that the Italians have done a great deal to contribute to the development of the world. And so I started coming at it from a different standpoint. And they'd walk into the classroom and the first thing would be that the lights would be off. Then I would have a map of the world that would be on the board. And underneath the board I would write down a few names. And then what I would do is I'd start with a whole process of saying, why don't we talk a little bit about the things that you're used to? And of course back then there weren't cell phones, there weren't, or if they were, they used to weigh 21 pounds, so there weren't kids walking around with cell phones. They were walking around with their notepads or with books, but none of the toys that they have today. So I'd start with that, and the simple one that I always started with was turning on the light, and I would talk about Volta. Volta being the person that not only did he actually come up with the theory of electricity, but he also was the first person to separate out methane gas and discovered that it's combustible based on things that he learned from Benjamin Franklin. So I started with that, and so Volta was someone that all of a sudden they could relate to, because the battery and electricity and power and the measure of power of energy, electrical energy. So that became something for them to understand. I'd show them a map of the world, and one of the first things that they would see on the map of the world was North America, because they came from North America. And I would start asking them names of different people, or suggesting names to them. For instance, why is America called America? The first thing, well, because of, America must be an Indian word. But America is not an Indian word, it's the name of Amerigo Vespucci, who was the cartographer that designed the map, and that actually created the map.
He was Italian?
Amerigo Vespucci was Italian, yeah.
I think he was of Spanish origin.
No, he was Italian.
Italian from Florence. And the
these were the things that the children didn't understand, and I apologize, but they didn't understand. It was one of these things that I wanted to make sure that it started to crystallize in their minds that Italians somehow influenced certain things in their lives that they would understand very quickly. Again, as we started progressing through the discussion, from Vespucci, well, who discovered the Americas? Who was the first? And everyone knows it was Christopher Columbus, but the kids back then weren't taught that Christopher Columbus was Italian. Christopher Columbus, just by the name, you'd think he was an Englishman. Go a little bit further, you look at your old history books, and there's people here from different vintages. If you studied history in Canada when I was in high school in the 70s, you learned that Canada was discovered by a guy by the name of John Cabot. And John Cabot was an Englishman who came from Sussex. Well, the reality is that Giovanni Caboto is from, born in Gaeta in the Lazio region, moved to Venice, and then from Venice, worked through Henry VII before the Church of England separated and became, under Henry VIII, became separate from the Catholic Church. But when Giovanni Caboto sailed to America, or sailed to Canada and discovered the shores of Newfoundland and Nova Scotia, he brought with him a crucifix, because it required the Pope to decree and to allow the King of England to bring, or to allow Giovanni Caboto to sail to sail. Anyways, he wasn't actually looking for North America, as you know. He was looking for a shorter route to beat Columbus, to get back to, or to take goods back to Italy for sale. So, for economic reasons, but again, the pattern. So we have Caboto, we have Vespucci, we have Colombo. A lot of explorers all had their origins in the country or the land known as Italy. A lot of people would say, well, that's great that they came from Italy, but what were they doing, looking to always leave Italy? And I've always maintained, I've always drawn comparisons between Italy in the Mediterranean and Cuba in the Caribbean. Italy is positioned perfectly because of its location to be a central point for trade between the East and the West, because of just being right there in the Mediterranean. You can't but hit one of the shores of Italy, whichever direction you're sailing. And because of that, there were a lot of influences that came into Italy from all parts of the world. You had influences that would come from the East, influences from the West. You had a great deal of money and commerce, and of course the money and commerce is what allows for people to investigate, to develop, to study. It just starts to change, and it starts to develop an economy of its own. And I think that's one of the reasons the location of Italy was key in terms of how it developed and how it provided for all these individuals to have access to so much and to be able to think about so many opportunities that existed. And I always talk about this in the times that I have spoken, that success always is based on opportunity meeting preparation. So if you have a society that's developing and advancing, and they're prepared, then when the opportunities present themselves, they're the first to jump on board. I don't necessarily think that Italians are the only culture that take advantage, or haven't taken advantage of that formula, but we certainly have had lots of opportunity because of the preparation. when you talk about the universities, when you talk about the development of thought and where it flourished and how it developed, Italy has lent itself. I mean, the music of Verdi, the music of some of the greatest composers was born in Italy, but it was born in Italy again. Why? The passion that a lot of people live their lives by. You know, the unification of Italy has an incredible story to it, and that unification gave rise to some of the most beautiful operas that we have written today. Most of them, a lot of them by Giuseppe Verdi. So you have those opportunities, and you're prepared. It gives you that formula for success. And again, I compare that to what we have in Canada today, especially in the Italian community. For all communities, but the Italian community in particular continues to lead in terms of how things are done, how things are developed, and I'm going to talk about a few of those examples as I sort of proceed. So when you talk about the explorers and you talk about what they contributed or what doors were opened, this land we have, the first Italian to come here would have been here in 1497, when Tibollo first landed on the shores of the East Coast. The story also about the competition between Columbus and Tibollo is also an incredible story, especially when you think about the history and how the history was written. That Tibollo's story really wasn't ever discovered in England. It was discovered in Spain, in the records that Columbus kept, that Colombo kept. The competition between Colombo and Tibollo was incredible during that period of time, because they were both competing to find ways to bring goods back to Italy as quickly as possible. And when you think of some of the writings that were found, very little was actually found in England, but a lot came out of Spain. And it was because one of the people that was on the ship that Tibollo was crossing over with was actually working for Colombo. So a lot of the letters that were written to remind or to tell Colombo of his experiences and how things were happening and what was going on, he was spying on it basically. But these reports are the ones that now tell us the stories of what Tibollo found when he came over. The oceans filled with fish to the point that the ship couldn't proceed forward. It actually was being pushed back by the cod that was pushing up against the ship as they were coming to the shores of North America. A lot of amazing, fantastic stories of adventure that, again, are all based on the fact that these individuals took a chance, not necessarily under the flag of Italy, because at that point Italy wasn't united, but under the flag of other countries, and they came and they made incredible discoveries. So when we talk about influences and we talk about stories, these are the types of things that I was trying to have the children understand. The difference, I guess, and the thing that has always been a concern to me, is that when we start talking about our Italian heritage, whether it be Italian heritage or any heritage, Chinese, Indian, African, whatever the traditions and the customs are, one of the things that I've always held firm as a belief is that our culture and heritage and our tradition defines who we are. And there's nothing wrong with sharing our culture and heritage and tradition and being vocal about it, because I expect that every other culture should do the same thing. I don't think I'm smarter or better than another culture. But when you look at what our culture does, who we are, and we feel confident as to who we are as individuals, it becomes much easier to learn and understand other cultures. It becomes much easier to want to be involved with other cultures. And for that reason, the Italian Heritage Month, when it was created, the whole idea of it was to be a catalyst for the purposes of not just beating our chest that we're proud to be Italians, but also to give the opportunity for other cultures to share in the things that we do, to learn about the different people that have influenced who we are, what we've done, and how we live as a community. And the interesting thing is, when you go through our culture and you listen to the things that we hold true and we're passionate about, you start to realize that, we keep on talking about multiculturalism being, something or a time that we should be celebrating our differences. In reality, what we should be doing is looking at the other cultures and saying, what are our similarities and how can we be a stronger Canada as a result of these similarities. So it's kind of a sidebar to the reason why I think it's important that we have to understand our customs, traditions, and where we came from, so that we know the direction we're going to go in the future. The influences, obviously, of the explorers is one aspect of our customs, our traditions, our background. But when you look forward and you look into other areas, there's been incredible influences in other areas as well. We've influenced the development of the sciences, of medicine. We've influenced the development of an accounting system. We've had some of the colonization work that was done when we initiated with the country, when Father Bressani, for instance, came to Canada, working with the French and working with the First Nations here. I mean, he eventually was, let's say, he wasn't treated very well during the period of time that he was here, but the work that he did was incredible. And again, a lot of people may not know this, but he was one of the first individuals to ever document the flora and the fauna of Canada. It may not sound like very much, but you stop and think about the work that went into something like that, to document something like that. He was also one of the first people to actually draw a map of Upper and Lower Canada. And that map exists today, and it's credited to him. So again, when you think of the influences of these individuals, now we're talking about 1500s. Again, these are things that form the basis or paved the road to a lot of the things that happened and that came forward. When we talk about the sciences I mentioned, Volta, when we talk about other individuals that contributed during the Renaissance period and coming forward, when you think of Galileo Galilei, when you think of Leonardo da Vinci, when you think of these other great artists, inventors, creation of the first helicopter, the first tank, when you think of all the different innovations that these different individuals created, you have to stop and ask yourself why. And it's a question that I ask myself all the time. And the only thing I can think of is the fact that the opportunity came to them because of their preparation. The world at that time, the Renaissance was happening. The Insurgimento was a period of time that an individual had a great amount of knowledge, or a wealth of knowledge that he was exposed to. That knowledge gave rise to questions. It gave rise to people wanting to know more, to go beyond what their comfort zone was. And that's one of the things that I maintain, that Italians have always been that way. Italians, for some reason, have always felt comfortable being outside their comfort zone. So why would you get onto a boat when you think the world is flat and possibly you're going to fall off its edge? Never to see your family, never to see the risk that you take. Why would you do that? Why would you consider something like that? As a scientist, to constantly ask the question, why? How can we improve this? Why are we doing it this way? Is there a better way to do it? These, I think, are all situations that are present to a lot of people, but for some reason, Italians have always been good at asking that question and then trying to figure out the answer to it. And as a result of that, they've done a great deal in the way of invention. So we come back, we can talk about someone like Meucci. Now, there's a lot of people in this room that are experts in a lot of these areas. So I can't elaborate because it's not a history class, it's more a discussion. But you talk about someone like Meucci. He works on an invention, he registers a patent, he basically invents the telephone. However, his patent expires, and Alexander Graham Bell, who happens to be a contemporary of his, registers the patent, and he becomes known as the inventor of the telephone. I bet you many of you don't even know who Meucci is or never heard that name. But if you look it up, and if you look at some of the case law that came out as a result of it, you'll find out that he's actually attributed with having discovered the telephone. Well, my favorite guy is obviously Marconi.
So what the American Congress years ago
accepted Meucci as
the
Canada
That was a case that actually
we have
was
to
decided.
somehow divide and try to
Well, the precedence, the way it works, the highest precedence in the land is our Supreme Court, then the Court of Appeal, but precedent in common law outside of our jurisdiction also is precedent. So it is a confirmed fact. But in addition to Meucci, you think of someone like Marconi. Now Marconi, and the thing that I love about him is that not only was he Italian origin, but he basically worked around the world. He worked, well, between Canada and the United States, and England and Italy. He had a kind of flow movement. He had a ship, and he basically did the first wireless communication, transatlantic wireless communication, and you can see the actual base of the station in Table Rock, Nova Scotia, just on Cape Breton. Again, a man.
His mother was English.
His mother was English.
Yeah.
Well, his mother was English, but Marconi is and his daughter actually is still alive. Some of you may actually have met her.
He was supposed to do on the Titanic and he missed the boat.
Well, it's a good thing he had his own ship. But Marconi actually spent time in Canada. His daughter has been to Canada. His two daughters have been to Canada. One daughter that I've spoken to, Marconi, is hopefully going to be coming next summer because we have an exhibit that will be brought to Canada by the Agnelli Foundation for Marconi. So hopefully she'll come to Toronto to open that exhibit next year.
How old is she?
She's 88, 86. But I'll tell you, I was in Florida last spring, and I called her because I was going to be traveling to Italy, and she says, "Why don't you just come down and have a coffee with me?" And I'm trying to explain to her I'm in Florida. It's a little bit far to come for a cup of coffee, and it'll take me a couple of days to get there. But she's all there. She's an incredible woman. We have a project that we're working on to erect a statue to her father, who again won a Nobel Prize in Science. And we've been working, looking for a location to put it on. But it's always been the dream, is to erect a monument here in Canada, in Toronto actually, for them.
Why not on the East Coast?
The East Coast, I actually traveled to the East Coast. I went to Table Rock, and the interesting thing about it is that the entire area is actually an old coal mine. And the technique that they use is when they dig out the coal, they fill all the shafts after they've exhausted the coal supply with water. So the place where the pillars are, the huge cement blocks that set up the antenna, which was set up as a square, those big rocks or concrete blocks are actually sinking because and the parking lot of the Tibollo Museum, they've lost it twice now. Because what happens is the sinkhole, they go home, they come back in the morning, and the parking lot's gone. It's actually 6 feet under. They fill it up again. They keep on resurfacing it. So it couldn't sustain the weight of the monument. And the place we wanted was to put it right at Table Rock, which is just outside of Dominion, which is where all the Italian coal miners lived back in the turn of the century when they were still mining coal. But Marconi is another great example of someone who invented something out of nowhere. And if you stop and think where Marconi came from and what Marconi did, you have to ask yourself, what we have today, and someone else would have invented it. I'm sure there would have been someone. But you know what? Wireless communication today. How would our kids? Remember I talked before about the 12-pound telephone. How would our kids today be able to communicate? And you think how the internet, the web has changed our lives, instantaneous communication, satellite communication. It's just like, it's phenomenal what has transpired as a result of something as simple as sending the first wireless communication. And again, simple maybe to our minds today, having lived the way we've lived. But for someone who had to actually come up with the idea and work through the algorithms and the study the process to be able to actually create something like that, it's phenomenal. And I hope next year when we have the pieces here, because it's part of the collection of radios and working models that he actually used and worked with, We're actually trying to bring over as well the first battery that was done by Volta. It's actually in the Politecnico di Torino. They have it there on display, and it's one of the things that we would like to bring as well, along with the Marconi exhibit, just to, again, look at these things and sort of say, you know, let people realize that it was something this simple that brought us to something so complex today, even though what started then as something very simple is something very complex today, or back then. Yeah.
I was just going to ask you, does the voltage battery help start my car? My battery's kind of low.
You'll have to wait till it comes from Italy to see if we can boost it.
What's that?
You'll have to wait till it comes from Italy to see if we can boost it. But you know, when you stop and think about some of the work that was done in terms of astronomy, some of the work that was done in terms of mathematics.
Yes.
You know, we have an accountant here who invented the double entry bookkeeping system.
Was not invented really by that. The double entry was used by the Arabs. There was this Italian guy that, I don't remember his name, that was passing by there, by whatever it was, and he saw the numbers.
No, you're confusing Fibonacci, sir. You're confusing
They
Fibonacci.
got the numbers.
You've got the numbers.
But beside the numbers, he introduced a system
Yes.
that was used by the Arabs in order
Yes.
to, and from there came the double
Double
entry.
entry, yeah.
As a matter of fact,
Hey,
one
Michael.
of the theoric of accounting
Enrico Fermi.
was from Syracuse, Italy, and
He's
his name was
divided out
Capucci.
we beat Hitler with
I
atomic
just-
bomb.
Yeah. But let me just,
Yeah.
the guy's actual name is Luca Bartolomeo de Pacioli.
Sì, sì,
Pacioli, well, but he basically,
He was a bit, monk.
he was exactly, he was a Franciscan. So if you know anything about the Catholic Church,
Well,
the bookkeepers of the Catholic Church
We
are the
have
Franciscans.
divine energy.
he documented the system that was in use by the merchants in Venice.
Right, well,
He basically, you know, observed, because he actually had a commercial experience working for certain merchants in Venice, and having learned the system, he then wrote a book explaining the system. So he actually, he didn't invent it, he documented the practice that was in the society with the merchants.
but it was
He
the
was
first
the first
time.
theorian.
It was the
Yeah,
first,
theorian.
yeah, he was the one that developed the theory and actually
Yeah.
wrote a book on
Yeah.
the use of the double
Yeah,
entry book
there's,
system.
I just read a book, it's written by an accountant to explain this. It's called Double Entry, and, you know, it explains, you know, who this man is, and, you know, what his background is, and how it's come to influence the modern world. But to me, the most significant of the, you know, Italian contributions are the numbers and the double entry. I mean, that is the foundation of modern capitalist, you know, economies.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and I wanted to highlight that Roberto's an accountant, so I kind of like looked at him for that because I figured, and he knows his history. So, but
Yeah.
the point that I wanted to make was that again, opportunity. My famous, if you, Seneca was a senator in the second 2 BC, during the period 2 BC, and his famous line was, "Success is when opportunity meets preparation." So a lot of people may have seen it, a lot of people may have heard it, a lot of people may even have used it, but the fact of the matter is he sat down and developed it into a legible, formulated system that has not only was it used in the 1800s, it's being used to this day, and there's been very little that's changed in this
Well,
system.
the people, according to the book, information in the book I read, people were coming from England and various other places to learn the Venetian method of accounting, which was double entry.
Yeah.
So they would come to learn it and then take it back to their own countries to implement it.
Yeah. Again, the purpose of and again, I don't have a lot of time, so what I'm trying to do is just emphasize points along the way that in terms of how things were created or how things were developed as a result of influences and what those influences, where they came from. Again, the explanation that you're giving, the points that you're making all tie back into the fact that Italy happened to be strategically located for a lot of these types of things to come to because of it being the center of the Mediterranean and the center of the development, really, the Renaissance, the industrialization. It allowed for a lot of innovation to happen there. And I think a lot of it, again, is attributable to the preparation. And I would like to believe, and I do believe, that a lot of that thinking and a lot of the philosophy, even if it didn't transpose itself from Italy to Canada through teaching, it transposed itself even in the way people are. And a lot of Italians, I think, as well, here have become innovators, have become people that have always asked the question why, as opposed to just doing it, or just, or saying why not in a situation where, some may come back and say that, we're perfectly fine doing this. The envelope's always been pushed. And again, you come forward and you look at some of the people and some of the influences in the modern world, you see that trend continues. So to me, again, from the standpoint of Italian heritage and why it's important and why we continue to do the things we do, I always go back to ask the question, the person that came here brought something with them. You hear all the time about the immigrants coming to Canada with a carton, a suitcase, and no money in their pocket or $50 in their pocket, and then landing in Canada and getting a loaf of sliced bread, and basically this was their first experience in Canada. You talk about some of the older people, and there's an expression that's in a book, Blood of My Blood. The expression is, when people are in Italy, they have this superstition, and I'm sure it's in every culture, the superstition that, the roads are paved in gold in Canada. And then, or in North America, all the roads are paved in gold. Then they get here, and they realize that, the roads aren't paved. And then they realize that they're not gold, they're not paved, and they're expected to do the paving. And you look at that in terms of our history, in terms of these people that came over. And I go back when Andreotti came to Toronto, back when Mulroney was the Prime Minister. There was a dinner in downtown Toronto, and I happened to be lucky enough to be invited to it. And I sat there and I listened to Brian Mulroney, the Prime Minister at the time, say, Prime Minister Andreotti, when you came into Toronto tonight, you saw the skyline of the city. He said, the skyline of this city was built brick by Italians. He goes, and what I can tell you, I'm really proud to say, standing here, is that while they may have built it before, they now own it. And it was a beautiful commentary on the fact of the diligence and the hard work of Italians. If you think of the generations that came here in, the paper, cardboard, the cartone, la valigia di cartone, the cardboard suitcase, and no money in their pocket, and to think what they've achieved in such a short period of time. I do a lot of work with Caritas, an organization here in Toronto, and Father Camparelli wrote an article a while ago that I've taken to heart, something that's so true about who we are as a people. He wrote an article saying that people will always reflect on that empty suitcase because the pain, dolore that brought to them, the fact that they were ripped from another land and brought to this country. But what they never reflect on is what they brought with them in their hearts, the DNA that they carried with them. And that's, I think, what has helped Italians, not only in Italy, but the ones that came here, become who they are. I hear a lot of times the parents and all the people that you see their kids growing up say, but you know what, the kids don't have any respect anymore for our traditions, for our customs. They don't have the same passion that we had, and that we're losing it. And if they don't somehow get restarted or interested in this again, we're going to lose it all. And I maintain that we're not going to lose it. We're not going to lose it because that DNA is in our blood. It becomes just a question of when it gets reactivated or when it gets restarted. And again, this isn't true just for the Italian culture, it's true for all cultures. What happens is there's always catalysts, there's moments in our lives when something happens. You lose a parent,
And all of a sudden, you know, the tradition of making supresada has gone out the door. Now you're looking to try to figure out what's the recipe, how do we, you know, restart this process again, because we don't want to go buy it. We can always go buy it, but you know, and it's probably cheaper for us to buy it, especially when some of us are professionals and can afford to go buy it. But it's not the same thing. There's something about doing something the old-fashioned way, the old way. So I think what happens is that when there's a death, that becomes a mechanism or a trigger to rekindle that DNA. I think a lot of people that have studied and are studying, it's rekindling them as well because of the fact that they're pursuing goals that and opportunities that perhaps weren't present or couldn't be present in another country. Italy is an incredible land. You know, we have about 70% of the world patrimony when it comes to art. It's inspiring living with that kind of, it's also very stressful to live in that type of an environment because you're looking at the masters, you're looking at the greatest and the best of the best in the world, not in Italy, in the world. So it almost becomes a stress to someone who appreciates their culture and their heritage to say, well, what am I going to do to keep it alive and keep it going? What am I going to add to be able to keep my culture and tradition and be proud of it? And again, when we talk about these opportunities and the culture that we live in, the country that we live in, and the environment we live in, you know, Canada, we're very lucky to have the ability to be Canadian, to feel part of society, but at the same time maintain those cultural ties with our parents, with our families. You know, I see a child sometimes is born, like a child is born into a family, a young couple, and all of a sudden they're doing all the old traditional things that the parents would have done with the kids. All of a sudden the grandparents are pulling out the old ribbons and all the things that, you know, they wore, they had passed down as a tradition from the parents before them. These are all things I think that at a certain point in time, things are rekindled, they're resparked. And that respark is something that, again, I believe in, and I think I can prove just based on what's happened with Italian Heritage Month in the last 3 years. The Italian Heritage Month started in 2010 with the passage of legislation. From 2010 to 2011, which was the 150th anniversary of the unification of Italy, we ended up having 30 events. From 30 events, last year we went to 60, and this year we're over 200. We went from being in Canada, in Ontario, to going across Canada and into the United States, and this year, now also into Italy. And what that tells me, aside from the number of events, also the attendances of these different events, is that more and more people are interested in preserving that culture. I think today, we're an older crowd, but I think we're an older crowd because it's the middle of the afternoon on a Wednesday. If this was at 6 or 7 o'clock in the evening, I think the crowd would have been much more diverse in terms of age, and I think also in terms of ethnicity. Because the things that we talk about are not necessarily only Italian. The influences are felt and seen everywhere. There isn't anyone in here who hasn't at some point been to an Italian restaurant, but at the same time I can bet that we can talk in percentages that haven't been into an Asian restaurant or into an Indian restaurant or into a Moroccan restaurant. The city and our society forces us in a lot of ways because of the fact that we have this mutual respect for each other to come together and to participate in different events. So to me, I think our culture isn't going to go away. I don't think it's going to die. I'm concerned when I see things like, you know, the newspaper closing and we lose the one daily newspaper that we had. Some people argue, well, you know what, it's not the only one that has issues. Look at the Toronto Star. It went from being a paper with 50 pages to a paper with 10 pages. But I think the relevancy of a newspaper is not necessarily only for the fact that there might be only a small group of people reading, but it gives people the opportunity to express opinions within their community that ultimately is shared and formulates itself into something that becomes the voice of that particular group. Now I hear there's cutbacks that are coming to Rogers Television. Omni's losing one of its programs. They've cut back their staff to less than half, and they're also going to be getting rid of a half hour of news. So all of a sudden, we don't have ethnic television. Thank God we still have Tele-Latino, and it seems to be going strong, and I hope there aren't any changes there. But if we don't have these opportunities to speak and to learn and to share, it's going to make the life a lot difficult for those parents looking for where the culture is going to come from or where the culture is. It's going to be a lot harder to speak the language when you can't have the opportunity to read it. It's going to be a lot harder and more difficult, and I don't think that's what the government is looking to do. I think it's, unfortunately, everyone wanting to make sure they make the maximum amount of profits at the expense of things that are fundamental and underlying to, to who we are, to our culture, and to our traditions. So, if I can advocate on behalf of, TV and on behalf of newspapers and on behalf of, I'm not talking about the Italian, I'm talking about all media, because the South Asian news is now being cancelled. Yeah, they lost, South Asian is gone, and the Italian is being cut down to a half hour. So, and we lost one newspaper. I mean, it's just, so, thank God we do have other publications, but I'm friends with a few of the people that run the other publications, and it's very difficult because it's hard to get funding, it's hard to get sponsors, it's hard to get ads, it's hard to get, but we as a community, we have to be strong, we have to stay together, we have to work to ensure that these outlets are available to us, because once they're gone, it's one thing to have them and criticize them, it's another thing to lose them and then try to get them back. Because it becomes a lot harder to get them back once they're closed, as opposed to working to keep something alive and going forward, even if it means some reinventing. And again, the Italians are good at reinventing, so to me, to have someone close a newspaper or shorten the amount of broadcast time, it tells me that they're copping out, that they're not looking to find ways to make the system work. So I leave that with you, and I hope that if you can send letters or get involved, and there's a few campaigns that have been started and that are going to continue on to make sure that the CRTC understands the importance of multiculturalism and the relevancy to to our community. And I think, again, not only the Italian community should be doing this, I think all communities should be doing it, because you know what, when they set the precedent becomes a precedent for everybody, regardless of the culture, regardless of the origin of who got the axe first. So we should draw upon our tradition, our DNA, and do what our ancestors have done, the pioneers in the different fields, and make sure that we do something positive to keep those things, keep the media outlets alive for us. I don't want to make it into a political thing, but it's an important comment that I've started making every opportunity I get, and I'm going to continue making, and hopefully make some noise loud enough that we can start trying to regain some of that ground back for our community, and for all the whole multicultural community as well.
Wasn't it the Italian government in Italy who withdrew funding for the Corriere della Sera? That's what my dad told me.
Well, they didn't withdraw funding, they cut the funding in half.
They cut the funding. So the paper depended on that funding to survive, right?
I don't want to answer the question in too much detail, because there's a lot of issues that have never been answered. Obviously, if you were getting $2.5 million and they cut it down to 1.25, and then they take a year to send you the money, it's definitely going to hurt you, because you build a budget based on the money that you anticipate receiving. If they all of a sudden change the structure, then yeah, that's going to be a huge issue. But you've got to also plan. You also have to look at the other surrounding factors. The news media has gone through, the paper has gone through a huge cut in terms of people reading, but that doesn't mean you cut the paper. It means you find and you invent ways to keep it relevant and to keep it going. And there's social media. There's other things.
Well, see, by the same token, that social media might just be the new wave.
But you take advantage of that. You don't lose one. You don't cut your nose to spite your face. You keep the thing going. it's a long, complicated discussion.
Yeah, I would agree.
But to me, it's important that there is an Italian paper, an Italian daily paper, and I think it's.
About I'm sorry that I interrupt you. About the Canadian Corriere Canadese, I'm disappointed because the Italian government gave $30 million from 1993 up to now, and I don't understand why they can be supported.
Again, this is a political discussion. I understand what you're saying, and that's why I said I really don't want to get into a discussion about what was received, who received it, what they did with it. The reality is we don't have a newspaper now, and I would like to see, we're lucky because we do have still a monthly paper, we have a weekly paper. I would like to see us figure out a way to help the ones that are existing now grow and become stronger. The Corriere is gone. I don't think it's going to come back, and if it doesn't come back, we have to help the ones that are there, because if we lose those, we've lost our voice.
No, but I could say
let me just wrap up my final
sorry
thoughts.
that I interrupt again. I'm sorry, I am disappointed because I'm Italian, and I don't want to say what I know and what I believe.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm wrong, but I want to keep it clear. Because the Corriere Canadese should be published. They had enough fund from the Italian, $10 million the last 10 years, that's very much.
That's what my father says, too, by the way.
I don't want to go further. I'm sorry.
No, that's what my dad
Okay,
says.
let me, I didn't want to get into this debate, because this is what the topic was about. But I want to wrap up, I've got 2 minutes, I just want to wrap up, and then we can have a discussion. I had other people that I wanted to discuss as well, sort of bring into to this vision, or to the globe, and the influences of the Italians. But I think I'd like to try to sum up, and then if we want to talk a little bit more, we can have a discussion or a question and answer period anyways. So the point, I guess, that I wanted to make today is that Italian heritage is alive and it's well. And I think that our society, especially the Canadian-Italian society, actually all the Italian societies outside of Italy, all have a hunger for what our culture is. And they want the opportunity to share that culture. They want the opportunity to learn from it. And the one thing that I've learned with Italian Heritage Month is that our nationalism, our sense of unity, our sense of belonging is much more, it's much stronger as between Italians and as between Italians of Canadians in general, when we feel strong about who we are and what our background is. Our history has given us a litany, lists and lists of people that have contributed, whether it be in science, in fashion, in auto. I didn't get a chance to speak about someone that you may or may not know, Sergio Marchionne. Sergio Marchionne is from Toronto. Was born in Italy, but was educated here at St. Mike's. Got a law degree, got an accounting degree, a master's. He went from Canada, having an amazing position here, to rebuilding Fiat, eventually taking over Chrysler International, and he's rebuilt the car company to the point where he paid all the money that had been borrowed to get the car company out of bankruptcy. When you look at people like that, you look at his contributions, and there's other people at that level as well. You look at the United States, and this is the part that always surprises me. You cross the border, and I'll never forget, there was a guy with the last name Siciliano at the border one time. I'm a proud Italian Canadian. I'm proud of my heritage. I'm proud of Canada. I'm proud of my country. I crossed the border, I said to the guy, oh, but your parents must be originally from Italy. So I'm curious, because Siciliano is the last name, could be Calabrese or it could be Sicilian. So I'm kind of curious as to, what happened. He looks at me and goes, I'm American. And I thought to myself, what a sad commentary on a country that, is a world leader, that, today is looking to Canada to try to reestablish the very traditions and culture that they've lost because they're in their 4th and 5th generation. Do we want Canada to go to that direction?
No.
Or do we want Canada to stay strong on the basis of maintaining and keeping all our heritages, not just the Italian? I mean, I have a 5th degree black belt. I'm not sure if I mentioned. I have a 5th degree black belt in Taekwondo.
You're better not have
I've lived Taekwondo for years growing up, so my background in Korean culture, I have a passion for it. I love Korean culture. I've spent time teaching masters around the world, in Malaysia, and I've traveled, but I'm always proud that my last name ends in a vowel. And not necessarily because I'm Italian, I'm Canadian. But I'm also very familiar with a rich history and culture that my forefathers gave me, and that I want my kids to have and to share. Because it's a badge of honor that I wear. It's a badge of honor that we should all wear. And again, regardless of what country you come from, because I've met people in India that are very, very proud and passionate about their country and their customs and traditions. And you know, I've been to India, and I sit down with them and I realize how passionate they are, and I can share that passion with them because we have something in common. Not necessarily the same traditions, the same religion, but we share the same spirituality. And that's that passion for our history, our culture, our traditions. So be proud of who you are. That message has to be heard by the kids, and don't ever think that they're not listening, because what will happen is a trigger will happen. Whether it's the passing of a grandparent, a parent, the birth of a child, a marriage, it'll happen. And when it happens, you know, I want to make sure that we've built a strong enough safety net that if I can't be making the sorpresada with my son, there's someone who can. And that's the whole idea of Italian Heritage Month. It's the whole idea of why we have to remember our roots. We have to remember who it was that were the trailblazers that brought us to where we are. And we have to be proud and work together, not look for ways to destroy each other, because at the end of the day, by working together, by being united, we build a stronger community, and we build a stronger country. And on that note, I'd like to thank you. If there's any questions.
Thank you very much, Michael, for that presentation on Italian influences in the modern world. And I'd like to thank you all for coming to today's program that will launch off the Italian Heritage Month celebration programs here at Downsview Branch. And as Michael mentioned, and it doesn't matter where we came from, what our ethnic background is, I think being in Toronto, we are so lucky to be surrounded by so many different cultures. And no matter where we go, what we are, there's always a little bit of, oh, you know, Chinese culture here, Italian influences here, Ethiopian flavor here. You know, it's just such a wonderful place to discover, share, learn. That sort of thing about all the different cultures. And for the month of June, again, as I mentioned, it is Aboriginal Heritage Month. It's also Seniors Month. And for Italian Heritage Month, we have a variety of programs. One being a storytelling program with a woman who is going to read stories in Italian and English. And whether you speak Italian or not, you're invited. Everybody is invited to come. So just, I'll give you the dates momentarily, but everybody is invited to come to just experience storytelling, no matter what language you speak, and that the importance of family gathering and storytelling. One other program I like to highlight is one on learn to speak Italian. It's a 1-hour presentation on basically not being shy, to look at menus, to look at signage, and being able to pronounce words properly. So it's not espresso, it's espresso, right? It's not cappuccino, it's cappuccino. Yeah, so it's things like that. And the really tough one that I always have problems with, it's not gnocchi, it's yeah, see? So it's a really cute program that is for all ages, for everyone to kind of come and not be embarrassed or shy to read these little words that we have. And one other program, or actually it's not just a program, we actually have the Golden Age Academy, who is a local group of artists, a lot of the members being Italian, who will be displaying their artwork at our branch. It's in the magazine area, but they'll be displaying their artwork throughout the month of June. So I encourage everyone to check out their artwork, as well as attend their reception, which will be next week. If anyone wants to know any of the dates for these programs, I've got a program flyer with all the dates listed, and if anyone has any questions, please feel free to ask staff. But other than that, again, thank you all for coming, and thank you again for
Piazza Italia, so I'm going to give you 2 tickets.
Oh, cool.
If anyone,
Thank you so much.
these are not for the hockey game. These are for Piazza Italia, which is taking place on the 9th of June. They have a $40 value to them. Whoever wants a ticket, you're more than welcome.
Where is that?
It's going to take...